Putting it this, there we go. I did not forget that. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Olga Malin, and this is Web BLS, our Georgia TESOL Professional Learning Series. I just realized that last time I didn't even introduce myself properly. So I am an ESOL teacher in Columbia County, Georgia. I teach middle school this year. This is my second year teaching middle school. And I'm also a member at large at Georgia TESOL, and that's why I get to moderate these sessions for everybody. So I'm so excited about that. And I am, hi, Sasha Yefremova. Welcome, welcome. All right, let's see. So today we are in for a special treat. But before we get started, let me just very briefly let you know that today the registration closes for Georgia TESOL Spring Symposium. So if you haven't had a chance to register yet, jump in real quick on our website, go ahead and register, and we'll see you on May 15th in Savannah for just one day of professional learning. Our next professional learning webinar will be on June 23rd, and that will be by Dr. Dave Chiesa. He'll be talking about artificial intelligence, such an important issue, so important that we actually labeled it special issue for AI. I look forward to it. I really want to know more about how to use all that artificial intelligence in the classroom, or how not to use it, that's for sure. All right, but anyway, today I am super excited because this topic is always so difficult and is always so complicated, so complex, so many missing pieces and so many different pieces that come to our understanding of all the nuances of this field, all the intersections of special education and ESOL, which make it even harder for us to navigate. And today we have these two wonderful presenters who are hopefully will make things a little bit clearer for us. So please welcome Nadine, and please correct me if I'm not saying your name right. I'm sorry. Nadine Lucate or Lucat Pierre.
That's fine.
That's fine. Okay.
You did it correctly. Yep, you're fine.
It sounds very French to me, so that's just how I would say it. Okay, and Brandy Judkin. So both ladies, both presenters teach in Cobb County, and they both have a wide variety of experience in the field of ESOL as well as in special education. So I will go ahead and hand it over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. We are super excited to actually get to sit here and talk to you all. And I think what's special about doing this, right, coming together and speaking about this is really the shared learning, right? Like Ogle just said, we're sharing the learning and it's concentrated with just us. And yeah, we want to talk to everyone about it, but sometimes when we talk to our ESOL colleagues, we get to hear what's happening, their best practices, right? And then we can apply those things in our very own classes. So I am happy to be here. We're going to be talking about tips and tricks for dual exceptional students from the middle school perspective. So you all already know we are coming from middle school. This is my fourth year doing middle school. I've been in ESOL about 13 years, right? Currently, I am doing ELA and ESOL together. I do have dually served students. I serve for my fifth period block. So I serve those students along with a co-teacher. I have been with Cobb County for over, I want to say 18 years. All right. So I'm happy to be here. So that's just a little bit about me. Brandy will tell you about herself, and then we're going to get going.
Yep. Hi, I am Brandy Judkins, though everybody calls me Dr. J in my professional life. The fun thing to know is literally Nadine and I are directly across from each other, like beside each other. So she's presenting from her classroom. I'm literally next door. I'm an ESOL specialist, but I actually work in the special education space during my daytime work. So I am a special educator. I serve a pretty high percentage of our students in special ed at our school. Are dual exceptional. And I'm going to actually, the first section of the presentation, I'm going to briefly kind of touch on what dual exceptional can mean for us, just to make sure we all have kind of our heads around that. In addition, I also teach the ESOL endorsement for Cobb, and I'm part-time faculty at Kennesaw State University in the Inclusive Education program within Bagwell College of Education, mainly teaching ESOL courses as well. And so this is kind of my passion too, is that intersectionality and helping people kind of navigate that. One of the nice things, it can also be one of the challenging things, Nadine and I, we are at one of the most diverse middle schools in the state. We're actually in the top percent, I believe, for the nation in terms of our diversity numbers. We have over 32 languages in our school. So we have a very diverse population. And so we serve, even in a class, even if it's not a class that is serving necessarily English language learners, it is an ESOL class. And even if it's not a special education class, it is a special education class. Like, we have a very broad population of diversity in our setting. All right, ready to get started.
So what you'll hear from what you're going to get from this session, we're going to talk about defining dual exceptionalities, right? Dr. Judkins will be talking to us about universal design for learning. I'm going to talk to you guys about some strategies at work, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Okay?
Yep. So our session objectives, we kept these kind of broad, just being able to define and describe the different types of dual exceptional learners that you may have in your classroom, being able to discuss universal design for learning and how that can help you rethink your classroom and how it may help you better meet the needs of your diverse learners. And then identifying and discussing useful strategies for serving dual exceptional learners in your classroom. So the first part that I want to talk about is defining dual exceptionality. And so if you're looking at dual exceptionality, we're speaking about students who fit into two or more. The dual is kind of a misnomer there. Two or more subcategories of service. So this may be students with disabilities who are also gifted. This may be students with disabilities who are English language learners. And this can also be gifted learners who are English language learners. Of course, it can also be students who are thrice exceptional. So that would be students who are in all three categories. English language learners who are students with disabilities who are also gifted learners. Sometimes you'll hear the terms 2E, two and then the letter E, or you will hear twice exceptional, though overwhelmingly twice exceptional is exclusively used to refer to gifted students with disabilities. Okay. When we're thinking about these learners, we really have three primary considerations that we want to think about. We want to make sure we are paying attention to assessment, that we're paying attention to coordination, and that we're paying attention to collaboration. Determining whether a student struggles and where they're struggling is really where we should first be looking. So, is it a language issue? Is it a learning issue? Is it both? Making this determination is extremely complex and does require very careful and informed evaluation. So when we're looking at English language learners where we suspect there is a disability or we know there is a disability, we know that they will have a highly diverse language background. We need to pay attention to that background. We need to pay attention to their experiences with prior schooling and what the disability is or disabilities are. We know that there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach in terms of their identification or instruction. The gold star best practice is for them to receive their evaluation both for speech language and the psychoeducational evaluation in their L1s, not just in English. Now, obviously, that does not always happen, but that is considered the best practice in the field. Federal law encourages that it really does require it, but that is not always implemented effectively. What we'll often see are, well, we did this assessment to see which language they were stronger in, and since they were weak in the L1, we just went ahead and did English, even if English was also an area they were weak in. And so beefing up that, giving attention to that, speaking with the parents and the families, and getting a sense for the students, the learners' skills in their L1s, and whether the struggles that are being seen are something that also they're struggling with in their L1s, is a really important piece, because we know that often that psychoeducational evaluation piece may not have been fully bilingual. There are a lot of systemic issues to be aware of and challenges, both distinguishing between struggles just related to the stage of second language acquisition that the learner is in versus disability, risk of overrepresentation in special education, at the same time underrepresentation. So that's always kind of this confusing idea, but it is true. We both overrepresent, we overserve English language learners, we over-identify them, and then there are also the reverse problem of English language learners who have disabilities that get overlooked. So we can both overserve and underserve at the same time. Inconsistent identification criteria being used both within and across states. More limited teacher training. So most special educators have little to no training in second language acquisition, which is why the ESOL teacher is an essential part of the IEP team. Even though often they're not sure what their role is in the team, they are a very important, a critical role, because they are speaking to how the student is acquiring language, how they compare to another learner at the same stage of acquisition with a similar background, and things like that really should be taken into consideration. And then often we also are dealing with RTI, or response to intervention, or MTSS, multi-tiered system of support frameworks, that really lack their cultural or linguistic responsiveness. In terms of instructional implications, we want to make sure that we are addressing language development and disability needs simultaneously. Many times in my career, I've encountered where teams have said, oh, well, the student is an English language learner and they're in special ed, but special ed trumps ESOL, so they're just going to get their services through special education. I'm like, wait a second. Nope, we need to work together. We need to find ways to work together to meet the students' needs, because they have needs in both areas. We need to identify and reduce barriers, whether those are language demands or inaccessible materials, things like that. We need to, of course, be using scaffolding. We need to be providing explicit literacy instruction, and we need to be using culturally responsive strategies. Nothing revolutionary there. I know you guys know that. And then collaboration and coordination are absolutely essential. We need to be really working as a team. General education, English language teachers, the special educator all need to work together with a plan with the student to help them make progress and be supported in their areas of need. The big takeaways in this discussion of what dual exceptionality refers to is that we need to be thinking about cultural and linguistically appropriate assessment and thinking holistically about our learners as we are going through that evaluation process. And so that does require getting that input from the family. Maybe the issue is a reading issue. Are we seeing things related to that in the L1, for example? Making sure we're looking at that. Also, that we're analyzing data from multiple sources rather than making quick assumptions. And that we're designing inclusive, responsive instruction that is deliberately and intentionally collaborative and coordinated. One of the tools that we can use to help us do this, and Olga, if you want to go to the next section, is to think about universal design for learning. And this is something that I think we're talking a lot about in the academia space, but I don't think we're talking a lot in the K through 12 school level space yet. If you look at your teacher evaluation, it still uses terms like differentiation. It doesn't really look at the universal design, and universal design still uses differentiation, but it really kind of steps back and looks at redesigning the whole thing intentionally from the get-go, so it is less explicit differentiation necessarily. And so there is a little bit of a radical rethink that we want to consider when we are looking at universal design. Universal design for learning is a framework that is intended to both improve and optimize teaching and learning. It is informed by and based on what we know about the human brain and its billions of interconnected neurons that do build those unique pathways. Like fingerprints, our students aren't the same because their brains aren't the same. CAST is the organization that you can really look to for the bulk of the resources and research kind of as a consortium that has come together related to universal design for learning. Universal design for learning actually is rooted in or has its origins in universal design within the architecture and design field. The idea of building a house that ages with you, a kitchen or a bathroom that from day one is designed so that it can accommodate someone in a wheelchair, but also someone who's not in a wheelchair, someone who uses a walker, someone who is tall, someone who is short. The same kitchen being able to meet those needs intentionally through design. Well, that was taken and that was applied to learning. How can we craft both our instruction and our instructional spaces so that we have our diverse learners and their needs in mind from the jump? And so the benefits of universal design for learning are that it is extremely equity focused. It helps eliminate opportunity gaps for those historically marginalized or disabled students because that is where we are starting from. It is very backwards design, very intentional in working towards that. There has been research that shows that it improves outcomes primarily because it enhances engagement, motivation, and academic success. And that it really does help all learners, not just identified subgroups or particular populations. It is intended to empower and foster independence. I don't know about you all, but in the middle school environment, I feel like a conversation all the time is how much our learners struggle to do things independently, how much they're reliant on, um, you know, step by step hand holding and those things. Universal design is intentionally thinking it through to empower students to understand their own learning and build that self regulation, that self management skills through what they're doing. In terms of our English language learners, there are additional benefits. First is access, because it helps foster engagement with the content, with the material, with the lesson, with everything, even with limited proficiency. It's intended to reduce stigma because it does offer options for everyone rather than singling someone out for a specific accommodation or need. And it fosters ownership by giving learners voice and choice in their learning journey. And I want to connect here. I've done a good bit of work on using design thinking and makerspace experiences intentionally for building academic language for learners. And this is also very similar. It's with this intentionality, with this mindset shift of universal design to our instruction, we intentionally build into the learning experience those opportunities for the exposure to the academic language, but also the use of it, the practice with it, the need to use it, that helps empower and foster learners. Now, with universal design for learning, there are really three major focuses or foci. And if you think about differentiation, you hear that we differentiate based on the content, the process, or the delivery, or sometimes the content, the process, and the product. With universal design, that can all happen, but really we step back to more at the planning stage. We're stepping back even further than that, and we're looking at what are we intentionally doing for engagement? What are we intentionally doing for representation? And what are we intentionally doing for action and expression? And in a sense, I think of this as the engagement is the why. How are we going to get the learners to invest in what we are doing? The representation is the what. What do we want them to be doing, but also what language are they going to be using? Do they need to use? How are they using it? And then the action and the expression is the how. What actually are they doing and what do they need to be able to do it and be successful? If you're familiar with the SIOP instructional model, this maps very nicely to this. Also works really well with the 5 E's approach that is often used in science as well. When we implement universal design for learning in an inclusive classroom, we are intentionally proactive with our planning. We're not retrofitting our lessons. We're not taking our lesson and then adding in things for specific students. We're designing it from the beginning to be accessible for everyone. We are intentionally being flexible with our classroom environment. So we are creating varied, accessible, and inclusive spaces for learning. This may mean that the setup for your room on Monday looks completely different than the setup for your room on Friday, depending upon the needs of the classroom and the lesson and what you're doing, and that you're doing that intentionally. We are integrating technology. Of course, this is not necessarily a required component of it. You can fully do universal design for learning with if you want to be a little bit on a tech diet in the classroom or that. But where we are implementing it, we're doing it very intentional as tools for accessibility. So that may mean things like if your district uses Microsoft or uses Google, using the live translation feature, using screencasting and text to speech, using screen readers, using things that are interactive, but very deliberately. They are not what's being taught. They are helping everyone access what is being taught. And then being very flexible in what the end product or products are. So that may be offering choices for how students are showing their proficiency. So of course that can be rubrics, but that can also be an assessment. So perhaps you have a test that all of the science teachers are giving, but identifying as a science team the 10 questions out of the 30 total that most critically assess the primary standards. And those are the ones that you're really doing your data analysis off of. Well, maybe you have some learners that do those 10 questions and then get to pick some of the others. You have some learners who do those 10 and then do a hands-on thing. You have some who do those 10 and they orally give you their answers and then they do something else with the others. Just kind of rethinking that and being flexible with what that assessment can look like. Having that conversation intentionally from the beginning. So not after you've taught, oh, it's time to take the test. It's time to do the test. Let's sit down and come up with the test. No, you've had that discussion. You've been having those discussions before you've even taught. And then some of the practical strategies for English language learners when we are implementing universal design for learning into our classroom, or when we want to pull elements of universal design for learning into our classroom, are things that we're familiar with. Y'all already do these. Pre-teaching vocabulary, bringing in images and realia to introduce concepts before reading or lecturing. I don't have it linked as one of my references or one of my resources, but I should have. There's a wonderful strategy that was developed by Dr. Wessels at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln that she refers to as like word quilts. And the idea is before a lesson, putting down that big, that overarching concept or term that you really want them to think about. So maybe it is a science class and that is density. Putting that in the middle of the paper at the table and giving them some colors and just asking them before they've learned anything about the topic, just fill the paper with anything this word makes you think of. Pictures, words, drawings in another language, anything like that. And then during learning, coming back to what they did and adding, and then after learning, coming back to it and adding to that. That's very much that kind of idea. Again, that flexible assessment as well. Those digital tools, graphic organizers, especially using them multiple. So one student's graphic organizer might be slightly different than someone else's because it helps them do something, access something better or in a different way. But really focusing on providing, you've talked a lot, the students have done things, but also you're pairing it with a visual and that kind of things. And then also our core thing as English language teachers, we know we always want to build on that prior knowledge and doing that very intentionally, building that throughout every lesson. Now, if you look in our presentation on the next slide, you'll see a few of the resources that I do recommend as just really starting points to learn more about universal design for learning, because what I discussed today is really just an extremely brief overview of universal design for learning. Honestly, you could do an entire graduate program just in it, and it is a growing field. First, I would recommend looking at Hess, Moore, and Abelsner, looking at their Universal Design for Learning classrooms that support international English language learners that did come from the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. I do recommend the Inclusive Teaching Practices Guide. I believe that it is from Duke University, but I could be wrong on that. And then the UDL guidelines, which you can actually get from CAST. CAST website is really just a plethora of resources, so it's really a great jumping off point for so much more than this presentation could possibly have covered. But those are really three starting points that I would recommend to kind of give yourself an introduction to universal design, or to share with coworkers if you're thinking about pulling some of these ideas into your own classroom. I am now going to tee it off over to Nadine.
Okie dokie. All right, y'all. So thank you so much, Brandy. And you gave us a wealth of information. And some of this stuff, folks, is just me repeating what she said, right? And so I want to start with what Brandy had said initially was, you really have to start reframing your who your dually served students are. And one thing I read, I love this. I'm going to share it with you all. These students are not twice behind, but they're twice served.
Yes.
And to me, that deserves like a moment, okay? Because typically the bias is they're behind. They're twice behind, but no, they're twice served, right? And so what do they bring? So we're teaching them, but we have to acknowledge what they bring into our classrooms, and that's important. Linguistic assets, right? Cultural knowledge, and unique learning needs. And I think it's important because oftentimes, we need to take a moment, step back and understand what our students are bringing into the classroom, right? So that's step one. So when we go and we shift our mind about how we're going to serve our students, we need to think about it that way. Twice served, not twice behind. Okay. So when we talk about strategies, you can go to the next slide, Olga. There are many strategies are critical for ELL students because they bridge the learning barrier, making academic content comprehensible, reducing anxiety, and fostering confidence. Effective strategies scaffold learning to ensure students can access grade level curriculum, build academic language across speaking, listening, reading, and writing, and allow them to actively participate in class. And I will tell you all, that is the key there. We want our students to be just as engaged, just as active as our general ed students, right? We want them to be able to achieve and to see that they're making growths and gains, because this is part of their social and emotional well-being as well, right? So we want them to smile. I had a student come and he didn't speak any English, and he was just so upset every single day. It was so difficult for him. Of course, he's new to the country. He's in this classroom setting, and he couldn't hear anything. When we turned on, we had an immersive reader, okay? And we turned on the language. We gave him access to the language. He became a different child. And I think as our role as teachers, when we're serving our duly served students, we have to give them access, help them gain access, help them feel part of the classroom, help them be able to engage with the content. And so that's what we're doing with these strategies. Next slide. So clear, structured language will be the very first thing, okay? We don't want to overwhelm our students. We need to use short, direct sentences. Brandy spoke to us about pre-teaching vocabulary. For my students, I tell my teachers also, it's about exposure, okay? They need to hear it, and hearing it might suffice, okay? They're not year two, we can go into the actual meaning of it. But when they hear the word, right? When they see the vocabulary word, when they can make a connection, a small connection, you have a win. Okay? You have a win. So it's a small win. So using short, direct sentences, pre-teaching vocabulary, repeating and rephrasing directions, checking for understanding. Do you understand? And there are several ways that you can check for understanding, right? And you can do the assessment. Brandy spoke about the science example, 30 questions for the grade level, take the 10, or take the 10 that will be measuring the exact standard. And, can they answer that question? Can they pull out the vocabulary term in the question? Can they identify it? I have my students circle the vocabulary term in the question, and that's a win for me because they're able to acknowledge, to see the word, and even sometimes pronounce the word. That's a win for me, right? So it's really about exposure, creating goals that our students can attain. When we're teaching our students and we're trying to make them stronger students, we have to meet them where they are. Scaffolding instruction. Critical, right? Breaking tasks into small steps, modeling the expectation. We talked about using graphic organizers. We're going to gradually release the responsibility, but first and foremost, we're going to model. And it doesn't always have to be the teacher, right? I pair my students up with a student and I'll say, show them. Here's an example. Here's a student example. If you have bulletin boards in your classroom, this is what I want it to look like. This is what I want. This is what I wanted to, if it's a graphic organizer that needs to be filled out, you can have that already pre-filled and have your student just copy that information. Because again, we just want to transfer the information, right? We want the transfer of information. We want them to be able to say, okay, that's a term that we're talking about in science. That's a term that we're talking about within mathematics, okay? So we want to be able to help our students to do that. And the way we bring our students along is through scaffolding, okay? We break it into smaller steps. Some of the work you might have shorter paragraphs. I teach ELA like I mentioned earlier. So I have some of my students, I have shorter paragraphs for them where I would require these 5 paragraph assignments for some others. I wouldn't have that for my dually served students. I require maybe a couple of sentences with sentence starters and frames that will help my students to get to the thought or the processes that where I'm trying to get them, right? Because my goal is that my student is not sitting here unable to do anything, just in the classroom and withdrawn. No, my goal is to make sure that this assignment, the same very assignment, is accessible to that child as well, and that he or she has met a goal based on that particular standard that is within their framework, right? So within their wheelhouse. So that's my goal. So I'm going to break the task into smaller steps. I'm going to repeat directions. I'm going to pull that student or group into a smaller group. And I'm going to see what measurable things that they can do so I can continue to guide them as I create that expectation and for them so that way they can do it, they can, have that ready for me, and then I can just, use it to guide my instruction in the future. So scaffolding is always going to be key, and we do it all the time. And I think Brandy alluded to it too. In the classrooms, you think that you'll find that all of your students benefit, okay? Not just the dually served students. I've had students say, Dr. Pierre, can I do it that way? That's easier for me. And these are my general ed kids. And I'm like, okay. Okay, if this is how, I'm gonna let you do it. If this I want to get this information from you, that's fine. So of course not all the time, and it's a case to case situation, but scaffolding will be is instrumental, okay? It's how we learn too. So we want to be able to give our students that strategy. We want to use the graphic organizers. We want to do the gradual release responsibility. And of course, you have to model. Modeling is something that if we want our students to know what the expectation is of them, we have to show them examples of what we're asking them to do. So the next one says build language through interaction. That's going to be very important, right? You want to encourage unstructured talk. So you all can tell I talk with my hands. I rarely sit. I mean, I sit sometimes, but if you see my classroom, I literally have a stage. It's almost like a little area because I feel like if I can't sit behind a seat to teach, especially when I feel like I need to get closer to the students, right? I want them to talk and I can't hear them from back here. So I kind of created a little space where I can kind of engage with them. I can get in between them. I can hear what they're saying when we're discussing certain things. Again, I teach ELA, so these strategies are specific to that. Encourage discussion before writing, but you can do that even before. You can do that in multidisciplines. You can do that in math. You can do that in science. You can do that in social studies, right? You want to hear what they're saying. A lot of times, folks, we can assess how they're doing based on what they're saying, right? You can tell if Johnny has it or if Martha has it based on what comes out her mouth, right? The responses that she's giving based on what she's saying to her peers. You can say, honey, let's go back. Come on with me to the small group because you are off. That's not even right. So you want to kind of encourage discussion before you initiate activities, even afterwards, right? You want to hear what they're saying. So unstructured partner talk when they're talking with each other. With, of course, dually served students, especially when I have my ELL students who are just transitioning from IEL, right? I have to provide sentence stems because they don't have the academic language yet. They don't have the social language, right? So my sentence stems help them to be able to pencil in their thoughts. What I'm asking, complete this sentence. And so I provide sentence stems to kind of help them to get it out, right? Use routines, think, pair, share, turn and talk. I let my students talk. I even allow my students to do it in their home language. And I want to encourage that because what I don't want to tell my students is that, listen, that's it. You're here now. You got to learn it my way. No, well, share it to me in your own language. How would you explain it that way? In my writing when I serve the students who are coming straight from IEL, and this is their first year in a co-taught classroom, well, in a general ed setting with general ed students, if they have to write to me. Initially, I will have them, they will write to me in their home language. And then I'll say, okay, now you have to use a translator tool to translate the assignment. So because I don't want us to I want us to teach our kids to be proud of their cultural, what they bring to the table, and a lot of times too, when parents and when people come in and they come into our school systems, they tell their children that, okay, no more. No more. It's everything. We're going to learn English and we're going to learn English. But I tell my parents, no, you are at an advantage for being a bilingual student, for being able to master several languages. You are at an advantage. I'm not a model language person. I speak two to three languages. But I said, listen, that's your superpower. Be proud of that. So when it comes to an academic standpoint, of course, we are targeting specific content goals. But we want to be able to build strong interaction. So I let my students, if they're engaging in their home language, yes, and it's funny because I've learned some things too. So I can throw in a word. Y'all hear me? Just one, not two, a word, especially when it relates, because in ELA, there's many discussions when we're talking about a particular story. We did the scholarship jacket. So we talked about the jacket and and abuela. So you have conversations to kind of engage the students to validate them, and that's how you build language through interaction. You want to validate these students, okay? What's our next strategy? So, y'all, I think I love this because we get to empower students, right? And we get to serve our students. We get to tell them that you are here because you have a superpower, and we have to make the learning accessible to them. We have to collect data through assessment. Yes, we're doing all of these things, but we have to make it accessible to them. And the way we do that is by having specific strategies that will work for our students, not his, not hers, not yours, not mine, but ours. And Brandy alluded to that earlier, hearing, oh, she'll be served in SPED. No, no, she's not. She's going to be served SPED and ESOL,
Together. Yep.
together, going to these IEP meetings, um, you know, figuring out accommodations for classroom and testing, right? So when we talk about, and this is only a little bit, like we said, because of course we don't want to, it's Friday, okay, right? So this is only a little bit that, like Mandy alluded to earlier, clear language, strong scaffolds, visual supports, right? I walk into classrooms and I see a lot of visual supports. This will help our kids being able to identify what things are. This all helps our students. Student talks. All of this equals to student success. And when you have a student who is successful, they are taking part of their learning and they're proud. We want our kids to come out and say, I have learned. I am proud of the growth that I've made as a result of having been in this classroom. So that's a little bit from me. And Brandy shared this with me. I'm going to drop it into the chat. It's Suitcase. It's a
Oh, yeah.
Yep, Georgia DOE Suitcase, which has a variety of resources that we can look at. And then now we will take your questions.
I don't think I have a question. I think I just want to applaud you guys for your passion for teaching. You look at it, it's 4:30 on a Friday after a long day, and you radiate this passion that you love your kids, and that just goes beyond the screen. Like I love you. Like I want to be a kid in your class. How about that?
Oh,
Sasha, it's so funny. I was just going to say I needed this inspiration shot on this Friday night.
Hmm.
You guys are amazing. I was dead tired today, to be honest with you, but you are so inspiring, and there is this wealth of knowledge. Well, I, on the other hand, have 700 questions. I just don't have time for that, I'm afraid. But I will open it for everybody else first. I won't be too selfish. But let me just ask one little one first and maybe give everybody time to think. Use my position of a moderator so I can talk a little bit more. Um, so could you maybe share like one example um, of, because you both mentioned collaboration, like collaboration between special ed teachers and ESOL teachers and content area teachers. Could you share one example from your practice of successful collaboration, of what exactly was discussed and
So,
what
yeah.
conclusion did you, like, what did you come up with? That type of thing. Yeah, thank you.
I think I'm going to use kind of my most extreme example. Nadine probably has a more practical example, but last year we had a young man who was served in our IEL program, our Intensive English Language Program, um, who from the day he arrived, it was very clear that he had a severe disability of some sort, even though we didn't have information that came with him that necessarily that had ever been addressed. I mean, he physically had one ear that was smaller than the other, for example. It was very clear he was dealing with a disability in addition to learning English. Over the course of the year, and at first I was not involved at all. I didn't happen to teach that student. I wasn't, usually our intensive English learners were not looking at, special education evaluation because they're so new. But because there's a law called Child Find, which really Child Find has its roots that almost go before some of the special education laws. like IDA, but that really says, when you're seeing a problem, you need to find a way to get the kid what they need, is basically what Child Find is. We did start that process, and that's where I came in, and working with that student to see what he really was capable of. So that involved our IEL teacher doing some assessments with him that were kind of different than the typical classroom assessments. That involved me doing some work with him. That involved our school psychologist and our speech language pathologist doing some assessments with him. And that also led to, I want to say through the evaluation process, probably 3, 4 separate meetings as a whole team coming together to figure out, like, what are we looking at here? What does this kid, what can he do? What do we need to support him so he can grow in his language, but also just grow in learning as a whole? And it took very much, it took the entire school year. His eligibility meeting, I remember, gosh, it was either the Tuesday or the Wednesday of the very last week of school. And it was a long meeting, but we did find him eligible. And then they had a follow-up meeting a week or two later, with his teacher for the next year. And we were able to move him into what we call in CALB a program class, but a setting that was able to really meet his needs. And throughout that process, the ESOL team was part of that conversation to ensure that we weren't saying, hey, no, he doesn't need any ESOL services at all. We were taking into consideration both his language proficiency, where he was, and what he was capable of, and what we wanted him to become able to do over time, and building that in. Now he's actually a student still at our school, but in a program class. And my gosh, every day I'm so surprised at how much he's grown. Like, he says his name, he's writing things. Like, he has grown so much because we did work as a team to figure out what he needed. Now, it took forever, but it was worth it.
Isn't it amazing when your hard work
Yep.
pays off and when you see those results every day?
Yeah.
Nadine, how about you? Any examples?
Well, I was going to say that I think the collaborative part is so important, because for me, a lot of my meetings, especially this is one of my first years of doing the co-taught with the dually served students, but a lot of my meetings are with general ed, right? And so you all, if just general ed typically come together for RTI. Everybody's familiar with RTI, right? Response to intervention. And that's when we start to identify the students, right? For Tier 2 strategies to see if there is a learning deficit there. And so and oftentimes SPED teachers are not there, right? Because RTI is the beginning process. You first have to see if there's a need there. But what happened in a lot of cases when SPED teachers and the ESOL teachers there, and I'll give you my example, is we're able to say, wait a minute, this is not necessarily a student, this is a language issue, right?
Yep.
So we're able to decipher what's language-based, what's a language issue, and what's another deficit area. And I think that's what's key, because what was happening, not at my school, was an over-identification of students in the special ed program when that was not the issue. But the issue was they were ESOL students. It was a language issue. So then what did we have to do? We had to go back and collect language-based data. Right. So that was where that's why everybody has to be in the room. It can't be just one. Everybody has to be in the room, because that way you can say, wait. We can say that's on this side. It's this side. So we can kind of see what's happening, and we can decipher which one is which, put things in categories, and we're not over identifying. And that was a very big problem somewhere else, not at Daniel. But that's what we and also and now and I don't know if you all know this, but now that there are protocols for language-based responses versus special ed-based responses, T
Yep.
strategies, interventions, because the two were so significant and there was so much over identification happening in our system, right? So that would be my share.
Mhm.
Everybody has to be in the room.
Absolutely. I want to echo that. That is, I think, the biggest point. I know maybe two other special educators in the state of Georgia who know access to the extent that I do. I happen to know it because I'm an ESOL specialist. That's really what I went to grad school for. I somehow just ended up getting hired as a special educator. And once they have you trapped in special ed, you're never getting out as a teacher. But the average special ed teacher, the average special education admin who is running that meeting does not know what those access scores mean. ESOL teachers, my biggest piece of advice is speak up.
Absolutely.
Y'all, often you don't
Absolutely.
know what to say in those meetings.
Absolutely.
Show what you know about those learners, help the team know what it means, because the average special education teacher has no idea what
Right.
it means.
Right.
Even some of our school psychologists don't know what it means. I'm going to be honest with you.
Brandy's gonna say it's Friday. I'm putting it all out there. Okay.
Yep.
I do agree with you because we feel like, it often feels like so lonely being the only person who actually understands this field. And I'm like, people, come on, learn some WIDA standards,
Yes.
please. Like,
Yeah.
learn some descriptors so we can talk. Because it's like I almost always I talk to myself, and if not, I have to, it's like when you have to explain your joke type of thing. It's a very sad
Oh, yeah.
situation.
It
Yeah, you
is.
have to explain every sentence that you're stating about your student and about what they can do at certain levels and things like that. So, oh yes, definitely. Yeah, so well, teachers unite and speak up.
Absolutely.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, definitely.
All right. Let's see. I'm just checking if we have any questions here in the
As we're
chat.
go ahead and close, we are the advocates for these
Mhm.
students, right?
Yes.
For not only for them folks, but for their families, I listen to the stories. I like to I meet my parents and I'm like, tell me where are you coming from? Why are you here? We are their advocate. We're their voice, so it's our job to support these families and these students. And I have had been very fortunate to meet some of my students later on, and they're like, Dr. Pierre, thank you. I still have some parents who call me on WhatsApp. Okay. So we have to advocate for our kids, and I work with Brandy, and she is amazing.
I
Uh,
try.
she works
Nadine
with
is amazing too.
so I really hope that you all just enjoyed this informational session. I know it's a lot for Friday. Thank you for joining us. Oh, thank you
Yes.
for Georgia TESOL for sponsoring this and hosting this web series. Tell your friends about it. Come on.
Yeah.
The information is here. And we want to share it. We want to support teachers because we have to advocate for our students.
We absolutely do. And I want to throw another plug. I know registration closes today. So if you're not already registered, if you're able to attend the symposium down in Savannah, please do. I'm sad I can't. It's one of my uncle's birthday, his 90th birthday, and I really can't miss that. So, but I will be there in spirit because it is such a it's honestly I feel like it's more collaborative conversation than even the big Georgia TESOL is, since it's a little bit small, it's a little more intimate. So if you're able to join that, it's worth it.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much. I had a blast. This was amazing. This was amazing. It's a wealth of information. And so it was so great to hear from you, ladies. I hope we will hear from you again. And I absolutely agree. Please register for Georgia for our symposium in Savannah. I agree with you. It is a smaller event. It is more compact. You have smaller rooms, smaller groups, and there is more opportunity for, I feel like, just this intimate discussion that not necessarily happens at Georgia TESOL, which is a magnificent event. It's a little different vibe. So if you have never, which we have only had one, right?
Right.
So if you haven't attended it yet, yes, so definitely, it's definitely worth it. If you're thinking, is it worth it? It's just one day. It is. It is definitely worth it. Especially because it's just one day and it's a smaller event, a lot more intimate and interesting. Completely different vibe. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much. Please join us in Savannah, and then please join us for our next Web PLS webinar in June. I believe it will be June 23rd that we will meet next time. But until then, please enjoy the end of this school year. I hope it goes
Survive it.
smoothly for everybody. I hope that we all survive it. Thank you, everybody, so much. I will hang out here for just a few more minutes if anybody has questions or just wants to chat. But other than that, I will stop the recording. All right.